In friendship, nothing surpasses loyalty, for it seems to be the nurse and guardian of friendship itself. Loyalty proves itself a comrade in everything, in adversity and prosperity, in joyful or sorrowful events, in pleasant or bitter circumstances. Loyalty views with an impartial eye the humble and the exalted, the poor and the rich, the strong and the weak, the healthy and the sick. He embraces virtue in its own seat and considers anything else irrelevant, not much caring if it is present or much regretting if it is absent. That was Saint Allred. The book is Spiritual Friendship. You can get it on Amazon. The translation is from Lawrence Braceland. It's really good. I really do recommend it for what I'm about to talk about. I'm about to talk about friendship and the loss of friendship that I've experienced throughout my life, and something that I feel is important to address on this channel. So lately, I've just been looking into my own past and just wondering, why can't I have any relationships? Why can't I keep any friendships that I've had throughout my life? And I have to go back and I have to think about, what I was like as a child and what my interests were and what I looked like and what my upbringing was to sort of get to that roundabout conclusion. It's not fun to admit that you lack socialization skills. It's not fun to admit that, when you're a child, you can't really connect with anyone else. You can't really connect that well with the other kids your age because you're supposed to have that. You're supposed to be able to develop and grow with your peers. I haven't studied the effects of the lack of intimacy throughout childhood development. That's not something I've really looked at, but I do believe that's probably part of the reason why it's so hard for me to read social cues, why it's so hard for me to actually fully understand what people are trying to communicate with me. And so, one of these ideas that I'm coming up with right now as I'm writing for my blog is this idea that if you are isolated for a very long time, you eventually have to find something in your life that will sort of fill the void within your heart. It could be something that's intellectually stimulating, it could be something that's emotionally stimulating. And I think for most people, they're going to try and fill that void with something that's going to be good and wholesome, something that's going to try and fill that emotional vessel that they don't have. It's why I'm very, very fascinated with things like VR, a lot of these visual novels, anime, and stuff like that, because there's a very deep romantic and sexual aspect to it that is very catering towards lonely men who are outcast of society. But in regards to myself as a child, for me, it was just either curiosity in terms of like my mind and what I was intellectually curious in, that or it was creativity. Uh, I always wanted to have my hands on something. I always wanted to grab something and just sort of play with it and just sort of break it apart. Not that I was necessarily like blue collar, but I realized, just thinking about it now, what I would do is I would, mod video games. I would explore uh, websites through different browsers and different search engines. I would try and find maps throughout the internet, which is something most kids my age probably were not able to really do. I would ask questions, at the age I want to say of maybe 9 or 10 of what the I on the back of the dollar bill meant. And so then I would go to the library and I would pick up books on the history of symbolism, which then led me down to a deep rabbit hole of learning about what Freemasonry was. And then that led me down to another rabbit hole of finding out about the Illuminati. And then at around age 10 or 11, I began to discover about the conspiracy theories regarding 9/11. And so I'm thinking to myself, what kind of child, has these thoughts, about 9/11 truth, or Building 7, or a globalist cabal, at what kind of child at age, I think I might have been in fourth grade or something like that, buys a book on the Illuminati from Dr. Henry Macow. That child has to be very lonely. That child has to have very interesting thoughts, let's put it that way, right? Atypical thoughts that are not usually within the mind of a small child. So I still have people to this day that probably suggest that I am autistic, and I just don't know it. I've never been tested for it. Maybe I am. Maybe I do have some sort of mental illness. I'm unsure. I'm unsure. The only illnesses that I'm fully aware of that I have is epilepsy, which I do take medication for. In regards to my environment and my upbringing, I was raised in a very feminine environment. So it was just my sister and my mom. I didn't have any male role models in my life for the better part of the vast majority of, my younger years. Elementary school and middle school was mostly just going to be very feminine centric, especially the fact that, and I do think this is sort of understudied, is the fact that the vast majority of teachers are female. I notice a lot of women, specifically female teachers, are very good at disabling the natural behavior or natural thought patterns of boys. And on top of this, that I was physically abused by a lot of male role models, and the fact that, one of my male family members tried to sexually abuse me, yeah, I did not have a lot of respect or admiration for older male figures in my life, especially as a child. And this is why, to this day, I don't see myself working in the trades. I don't see myself in a very, quote unquote, conventional masculine activity. So no, growing up during those important years of my life, I didn't have that dad that encouraged his son to go out and play baseball or hockey. I would have loved to, believe me. It would have been a great bonding activity for me to do that. But I didn't have anyone to encourage me to take up, camping or something like the Boy Scouts, which I'm not even so sure that exists anymore. And this is where I also get very upset with parents because I believe a lot of them mistakenly believe that kids have natural inclinations towards certain things. Oh, well, this child, he's an 8-year-old boy, so he naturally has an inclination to play football. Well, no, no, that's not true because he has to have a role model get him into that sport. Usually that's the father. But if that child is in that same situation where the father is abusive and neglectful, what we're going to see is a pattern of rebellion. We're going to see that same boy turn into the complete opposite of what his father is. He's going to want absolutely zero association with anything that has to do with that abusive father. So just to give you an idea of how bad it was, aside from the fact that, at around ages 10 or 11, I was deep in these conspiracy theories and, I picked up some weird hobbies and stuff like that, right? I believe in the third or fourth grade, I had a kid come up to me and tried to fist bump me. And this is how bad it is. I had no idea what a fist bump was because I had no one come up to me and try and give me a fist bump because I never had a friend show me what a fist bump was. So what I did was I took my hand and I slapped the top of it, the top of his hand. You got to think about how embarrassing that is, right? Where you can't recognize these very important social cues. I know Desmond Morris calls them tie signs. That sort of uh, body language that demonstrates, okay, this is how a person demonstrates, their relationship with another person. The fact that I didn't have something so simple as a fist bump registered in my mind is a very bad indicator of just how socially inept and isolated I really was at such a young age. It's I don't know. It still kind of gets to me at this old age I am right now. But call it the grace of God or call it whatever. I'm 12 years old and I moved to a different county, and there I meet my two best friends in the whole wide world. And the reason for that being is because they're both outcasts just like me. And for the sake of privacy, I'm going to give them different names, so I'm going to call them Aaron and Kevin, right? But Aaron and Kevin, I mean, they grew up in very similar environments. Aaron, his household, he came from a divorced background. Kevin, he was overweight and his mom was the abusive one instead of, in my case, it was my father. But We shared very similar interests in terms of video games, in terms of stories, in terms of, what we wanted to do. In my case, I love the arts, I love drawing and painting. In their case, they were also creative. Um, Kevin, he would program his own games using RPG Maker and make sprites, and he was pretty talented at it. Meanwhile, Aaron, he also wanted to get into game dev, but he was also playing guitar, and he was also very passionate about video games and music. So all three of us, in a way, were outcasts that also had a creative spirit and energy within us, and that's how we were able to just talk together and see each other, sort of as just like one body. And it was just very, very beautiful that finally at this age and during middle school, I was able to meet two people that shared a connection with me that was very, very powerful. In the friend group that we had, Aaron was the tallest and he was the funniest. And Kevin was the jolly one. He was the one that was able to lighten up the mood, and he was also the very knowledgeable, sort of nerdy one. I was talking to someone on Discord, basically describing, why these online friendships that we have, if you even want to call them friendships, just will never match the importance of a real friendship. And I was describing to him what it felt like when I got to see Aaron every day, first thing in the morning at school. I was describing how my day would change, when he would come by. How a smile would creep across my face, with and my heart would bounce with joy, as soon as I saw his silhouette, and a sea full of students, and I recognized, oh hey, he's right there. I can walk up to him and just, give him a pat in the back and just see that he's alive and that I'm with him. And in those moments, it felt like there was never a moment that was dull. It felt like I was always creating a new memory and that every moment I could cherish. That's how much I really did love this friendship. That's how special that both Aaron and Kevin felt to me. I never felt like I was being taken advantage of. I never felt like I was wasting my time with them. I never felt like I ever wanted to take advantage of them either. I felt that in a sense, I even told them this one time in high school. I was like, "You guys are basically the brothers that I never had." I use the term honorary brothers, but that's how much they meant to me. And this is way before my conversion to the Catholic faith. This is way before I started reading any literature on friendship. But the bond just felt so relieving because I was just isolated for years and years of my life. During my younger years, I never got to experience sleepovers. They call them play dates, obviously, when you're much younger, but I never was able to experience the joy or the happiness that went with those feelings. But being older at 12, 13, yeah, I did have a lot of time to be able to have sleepovers with my friends, to stay until, 3 o'clock in the morning just playing Halo and being able to go and buy video games over at the used game store, being able to go out to restaurants, being able to just walk around downtown with them. I remember one night, we climbed up on my roof and just looked at the stars and just cracked jokes all night, until maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, I think. I'm going to make a separate video on this quick anecdote I'll give right now, but I remember being in the library, for studying with Aaron. And we're cracking jokes, and these girls that are also friends with us, they can see how much I'm looking over at Aaron and how much I'm smiling, just because of how happy his presence makes me. And so one of the girls, she turns her head and she looks at us, and then she points her finger at me, and she says, Midwest, are you gay for Aaron? It's been years since I thought about that moment, but the idea that a friendship could be perceived as being gay is just the dumbest thing ever. It's I find it heartbreaking the fact that I happen to have a very loving relationship with a friend who happens to be the same gender as me, right? And the only conclusion that these girls make is that I must be gay because I'm so happy to be with my best friend. I also find it very strange that a lot of female relationships and friendships, even to this day, like when I'm at work, they can be as intimate as possible. They can say, love you, girl. They can go shopping together. Uh, when I'm at work, they'll buy Starbucks together. They'll call each other lovey-dovey names. I can't really remember doing anything like that with Aaron, but just the smallest little thing of me smiling and me just being happy was enough for the girls in my high school to accuse me of being homosexual. But like I said, I'll save that for another video. Um, but one last thing before I move on to the main topic is a good indicator of a very solid friendship is vulnerability. If you're able to find that one person where both of you are able to share secrets with each other, where the both of you are able to be vulnerable, not just with words, but with the body and the spirit, you know you found the person that is basically bound to your soul. And it doesn't have to be a romantic partner. I think this is where a lot of confusion in the incel space comes from. There's this misconception in the incel space where, if I just find the right partner, if I just find that perfect woman, then I will be complete. And that's just not true. And so a common mistake is that the incel sort of suppresses a lot of what he feels and a lot of what he wants to say. And when he believes he's finally found that perfect woman of his dreams, he lets it all out. And this is where women correctly use the word trauma dump, to describe this phenomenon. This is a social phenomena because men are conditioned not to share their emotions with other men. We're told to box everything in. We're told to, be stoic, whatever that means. We're told to be a man and that a man never shows emotions. But if you want to find that best friend, that person you can trust, that person that you can call your companion, that person that you can essentially share your soul with, how do you know you found that person if you can't even share your most intimate secrets with that person? And so we carry a lot of baggage because of our conditioning, and we throw it all at our romantic partner. This is where the term emotional labor comes from. And frankly, I understand where they're coming from. I don't blame women for this feeling. I'm not blaming the men either for doing this, to their potential romantic partners or their dates. I blame a lot of the stereotypes and the gaslighting from society that tells us how to live and how to be men and how to be women. This is from Niall Boy in her paper Boys' Friendships During Late Adolescence. We have not paid much attention to the intimacy in boys' friendships because boys are supposed to be, by nature, not interested in these types of relationships. Yet if we look back in the United States or at other cultures, this assumption about boys' natures falls apart. According to social historians, emotionally intimate friendships among American men were highly valued and very public in the 19th century. Yet the conceptions of manhood and maturity in the United States and elsewhere rest on valuing emotional stoicism and autonomy exclusively. Those of us from the United States and in many other places typically tell our children, particularly as they reach late adolescence, that they must not only separate from their parents, but also from their peers and move toward independence. When I was with Aaron and Kevin, I basically wanted every day to be high school. I didn't want the good times to end. The idea of having to grow up and having to mature was not very appealing. I remember not taking my graduation very well at all, because I knew that it was all going to be over very soon. The year after our graduation, we planned a trip and we went up north to a camping site. And we had a very fun, enjoyable week up there. We stayed in a, cabin, we went hiking, we went to different restaurants, we watched movies all night, we went fishing, but I still just didn't want it to end. I knew things were getting really weird when we were at McDonald's one day, and I'm sitting there with Aaron and Kevin, and Kevin accidentally misspeaks and he brings up something that Aaron never told me. Aaron and Kevin had both started a YouTube Let's Play channel, and they had never mentioned it to me before. And as it turns out, they were making content without me knowing about it. They were essentially starting a project with just the two of them and never talked to me about it. They never invited me to join in. They didn't want me involved. And so, me not fully realizing or contextualizing the situation at hand, I just thought it was a mistake and I asked if I can join them. Aaron reluctantly did have me join, and we did a live stream, and we thought it was a lot of fun. At least I did. By the way, if you somehow try and find it, I looked and it's gone. So the traces of it and the names associated with it are all gone. So good luck. But things grew more and more distant. Aaron and Kevin, they both worked at the same job, and they started taking their job a little bit more seriously. They were happy to know that I was working, but they felt that I was still an impressionable teenager. They both told me that I was stuck in the past. And so one day, well, this is back when, Tumblr was still somewhat popular. I opened up my account and I'm blocked, right? I try texting them and I get no reply. So I'm like, well, what the heck's going on? Turns out they both coordinated a plan to kick me out of the friend group and to get me out of their lives. And they're both very squirmy about it. Like they don't want to admit, "Hey, we just want Midwest out of the friend group. We just don't like him anymore." I keep pleading with Aaron for an explanation over and over again, but he's either non-responsive or he's very squirmy about it and like not truly fully giving an answer like, "Oh, I'll respond, sometime later or whatever. I'm just busy with this." In 3 months, he keeps up that weird game that he's playing with me. Until finally he just confesses that he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. Him or Kevin. And so I just break down. I break down, I got tears in my eyes, and I'm screaming at them. I call Kevin on the phone, I'm yelling at him, I'm just cursing him out. And that was the last time I ever talked to them. The last time I ever saw Aaron, I was working at a pharmacy, and I just happened to see him and someone else doing some shopping, and I remember thinking to myself, yeah, no, I'm not even going to say hi. So I remember the first thing that went to my head is I'll just go ahead and go back to doing what I'm doing right now. I've experienced being canceled at an art school before the word cancel culture was even a thing, before normies even knew what an SJW was. I've received death threats from people before at that same school. I've had people who I thought were Discord friends just forget about me or block me. But nothing hurt more than what I experienced with Aaron and Kevin. I think a lot about relationships like Sam and Frodo, or David and Jonathan, or Achilles and Patroclus. All these wonderful friendships that are just so profound and they change how you perceive relationships, especially among men, and what it means to be a man and what it means to love someone, to have them as a distinct part of you and to share with them their essence as if they were another part of your soul. It really felt like I had that for 7 years of my life, and I haven't had anything like that since. All I have now is two feelings. All I have now is pain and memories. The pain of knowing that it's gone and that I will never have something like that ever again. And the pain that it's also just a memory. Just something that I can dream about. Just something that I can think back to, but I can never go back and reach towards and time travel back to. Just to feel the same sense of happiness I once did, when I was 13, 14, 15. I've tried getting crumbs or little drops of that taste of friendship, and nothing compares to what I experienced in my past with Aaron and Kevin. And what's worse is, I'll have people like my own father or whatever just tell me to just forget about it. Just forget about it. Why are you thinking about it? Just move on. Focus on your career because that's what's most important. It's like a lot of these people, especially older boomers and stuff like that, just don't understand that you had a reason to live. You had a reason to fight on and get that pay raise, to get that promotion. Because you had someone telling you, I love you. You had someone in your bed next to you. You had children coming up to you and hugging you when you walked through the door. Why should I let my body and my mind suffer if I don't have that in my life? If I don't have the good things that are worth sacrificing? It's why I always do the bare minimum. I swear, a lot of people just forget that we're social creatures. We were not meant to be isolated. We were not meant to slave away at the corporate machine or whatever it is. And I'm not saying to give up, if you have no one in your life. I've accepted that I'm going to be alone probably for a long time. So I'm trying to find communities in other ways. I'm trying to find connection through other means. I'm not saying online communities through discords or whatever are like a bad thing. But more than losing connection with our neighbors and more than losing connection with greater society, we lost connection with our friends. We don't know how to make friends. We don't know how to keep friends. I think we don't know what it means to really truly value a friendship. I think nowadays everyone just views every single relationship as being a give and take type of relationship, as being transactional. What can I get out of this person? What's in it for me? Most friendships nowadays are very, very flimsy. They're friendships built on sand because they're built on a very minuscule hobby like enjoying the same Marvel movies, which is not a strong foundation at all. That friend that also happens to like the same comic book character, is he going to be someone that's going to risk your life for you? Is he going to be the same person that you can call at 3 in the morning? Is he someone that you can talk to about your own personal trauma with? Like, I'm sorry, if all he ever wants to talk about is just these stupid Marvel movies, like, that's not a friend. I've come to the realization that I'm basically going to be an outcast. I was destined to be an outcast at age 10 when I was reading books on the Illuminati, and I've realized that I'm just going to be an outcast for the rest of my life. I don't believe in fate, I don't believe in genetic determinism, but at the same time, I was destined to live out this life. The two best friends I had were also outcasts, but the three of us were outcasts together, and so that's what made us navigate the world in the special way that we did. Aaron and Kevin were my other. It was like meeting twin brothers that shared the same essence. My other halves, so to speak. Like, I know that sounds a bit flowery or a bit romantic or whatever, but it's very important to recognize what you have and to recognize what you're lacking. This is how you better understand yourself and how you better understand how to fix your situation. This is why I'm not going to go out to any bars. This is why I'm not going to do cold approaches, because that's not a solution. That's not how you meet real people. That's not how you form genuine, authentic connections. I'd love to end this video with some sort of conclusion, but we're at a period in time in culture where we're so atomized, and it feels like we don't know how or don't even want to make connections with other people. The only advice I can really give is that if you are able to, if you feel that you're fortunate enough to be able to find someone that is your soul, someone that, and I'm not talking in a romantic or sexual sense, I'm talking anyone that you feel is compatible enough to share your essence, someone that feels like as if they are the same as you, go for it. Be more vulnerable, be more open. I'm not talking like some sort of like liberal, like, oh, just share your feelings. I wish people would share their feelings. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying to announce everything you feel to the world and expecting the world to cater to you. I think that'd be a bit weird to kind of expect that. But we need to rethink what friendships mean. We need to reevaluate our relationships in our life. How much do they mean to us? What does it mean to call someone a friend? Is it a casual thing or is it a very special thing? And so I'm going to end this, with another quote from Saint Alred, since he basically what he did is he took the work of Cicero and he Christianized it. I do recommend Cicero's work on friendship since it's also very important, but for the average Christian, I also recommend Saint Alred's work. No medicine is more valuable, none more efficacious, none better suited to the cure of all our temporal ills than a friend to whom we may turn for consolation in time of trouble, and with whom we may share our happiness in time of joy.